What if, one morning, you opened your eyes and found only darkness? What if you reached out to call someone, but no sound came back? Not even your own voice. What if the world around you became a silent storm, where nothing spoke, nothing answered, and every heartbeat echoed inside an endless void? For most of us, silence is peaceful, but for her, silence was a prison. Her name was Helen Keller, a girl born with the laughter of life in her eyes, until one illness stole both her sight and her hearing before she was even 2 years old. Overnight, her bright world vanished into shadows. Imagine growing up unable to see your mother's face or hear her comforting words. Imagine wanting to understand, to speak, to love, but trapped behind walls no one else could see. The world called her broken. Doctors said she would never learn, never communicate, never be more than a shell of a person. Yet deep inside, beyond the silence and the darkness, something was alive, a spark that refused to die. This is the story of how that spark became a flame. Stay with me till the end, because this is not just a story about a girl who could not speak. It's about a soul that taught the whole world how to listen. Helen Keller was born in the summer of 1880 in a small, sunlit town in Tuscumbia, Alabama. She was a lively child, curious, joyful, full of laughter that filled her family's home with warmth. But when she was only 19 months old, a sudden illness swept through her tiny body. Doctors called it brain fever. In a few short days, it took away everything: her sight, her hearing, her connection to the world. From that moment, silence and darkness became her reality. The little girl who once ran toward her mother's voice now lived in confusion, trapped in a storm she couldn't name. She could not see light. She could not hear sound. And without words, she could not understand the meaning of love or comfort. Her parents, though loving, were lost. They watched helplessly as Helen grew wild and frustrated, screaming, hitting, throwing things, desperate to make herself understood. Imagine a child who feels everything but cannot express anything. Her world was not quiet. It was chaos without sound. Inside her, however, was a deep longing, a hunger to connect, to understand, to be understood. But how do you reach out when no one can hear you, and you cannot even hear yourself? The days turned into years. Hope in that household was fading like the afternoon sun. Until one day, a new figure arrived, a young woman carrying both wisdom and pain in her eyes. She had once known blindness too. Her name was Anne Sullivan, and from the moment she stepped into that quiet, chaotic home, Helen's life and the world's idea of impossible was about to change forever. Anne Sullivan arrived at the Keller household on a cold March morning in 1887. She was only 20 years old, barely an adult herself, but already carried the weight of her own darkness. Half blind since childhood, Anne had lived through poverty, illness, and loss. Yet what she lacked in sight, she possessed in spirit. A fierce belief that even the deepest silence could be broken. When she first met Helen, the girl was wild, untamed by understanding, frightened by confusion. Helen screamed, kicked, and resisted every touch. But Anne did not retreat. She saw beneath the chaos a child who wanted desperately to reach out, who was fighting not against her teacher, but against her prison of isolation. Anne began with small lessons: a doll, a spoon, a cup. She pressed Helen's hand into each object, then spelled the letters into her palm: D-O-L-L. Helen imitated the motion, but did not understand. To her, it was only touch, meaningless patterns in a dark void. Days passed. Frustration grew. Helen's anger burned, and Anne's patience was tested. But she refused to give up. Somewhere in her, Anne wrote in her journal, there is a mind waiting to awaken. Then came the day by the water pump. Anne guided Helen's hand beneath the stream of cool water, spelling again and again, Watir. Suddenly something shifted. Helen froze. Her lips parted. For the first time, she connected the sensation on her skin with a word, with meaning: water. In that instant, light broke through the darkness. Helen touched the earth, the pump, Anne's face, spelling each one with trembling fingers. The world, once silent, began to speak. Anne smiled through tears. The door between two worlds had opened. From that moment at the water pump, Helen's life began to change. Not in an instant, but through an unrelenting struggle. Once she understood that everything had a name, she became insatiable. She touched everything around her, demanding to know its word. The world that had once been chaos was now a vast library waiting to be read through her hands. But progress was never easy. Learning to spell was one thing. Understanding the meaning of life through touch alone was another. Each day brought frustration, exhaustion, and tears. Anne's lessons were strict, sometimes relentless. She made Helen spell words dozens of times, forcing her to associate ideas, actions, and emotions. When Helen resisted, Anne stood firm, patient but unyielding. Outside their small circle, the world was less kind. Visitors often whispered that Anne was wasting her time, that Helen's progress was an illusion. She can mimic, they said, but she doesn't truly understand. The whispers cut deep, but Anne never let them reach Helen. Instead, she turned every doubt into determination. Helen's inner fire grew brighter. She began to read Braille, then to write. She learned arithmetic, geography, and history, all through touch. Every page she read was a mountain conquered. Still, she longed for something more, to speak. The world had given her hands to spell, but she wanted her own voice. The next years were filled with both triumph and heartbreak. Learning to speak meant shaping words she could not hear. Each syllable was a mystery. She placed her fingers on her teacher's lips, feeling vibration, breath, and rhythm. "Feel it," Anne would whisper. "Then find it within you." Her first words were broken, faint, but they carried the force of a miracle. When she managed to say water aloud, tears streamed down Anne's face. That small sound, imperfect, trembling, was a victory greater than any applause. But Helen's greatest test was still ahead. At 16, she declared she would attend Radcliffe College, the women's division of Harvard. The world laughed. How could a girl who could neither see nor hear survive in a world built on words and sound? Anne, though afraid, stood beside her. "If you wish it," she said, "then we will find a way." The road was brutal. Books had to be translated into Braille by hand. Lectures were spelled into her palm, letter by letter. Nights stretched endlessly as Helen studied through fatigue and doubt. Yet she pressed on. Each obstacle became a step, each failure a lesson. There were days she broke down, days she thought of giving up. But then she remembered that moment by the water pump, the day darkness had cracked open, and she whispered to herself, "Everything has its name, even courage." Years later, when she walked across the stage to receive her degree, the first deaf-blind person in history to earn a Bachelor of Arts, the applause thundered through the hearts of those who once doubted her. Helen couldn't hear it, but she could feel it, in the vibration of the floor, in the tears on Anne's cheeks, in the quiet pulse of triumph within her own chest. She had fought against silence and won. Years passed, and Helen Keller became not just a woman who had conquered her own silence, but a voice for millions who lived in theirs. She wrote books that reached across continents, stood before crowds she could not see, and spoke words she could not hear. Yet somehow, her message was heard louder than most. When asked how she could live so joyfully despite her condition, Helen smiled and said, "The only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision." Those words carried the weight of her journey, a truth she had lived, not learned. Helen understood something few ever do, that light and sound are not what awaken the soul. Understanding is. She had learned to see through touch, to hear through faith, and to speak through love. What once felt like punishment became her greatest gift, the ability to teach others what truly matters. She often said that the world is full of people who can see yet never notice beauty, who can hear yet never listen, who can speak yet say nothing. In a world overflowing with noise, it was her silence that carried meaning. Helen's revelation was not simply about overcoming disability. It was about discovering that the limits around us are not walls, they are invitations. Each boundary we meet whispers, "Go further." She believed that gratitude was the bridge between darkness and light. Every morning, she thanked God, not for what she had lost, but for what she still had. The ability to feel the warmth of the sun, to sense the kindness in a friend's hand, to dream. And through that gratitude, she transformed silence into strength. Her life became a living testament that the human spirit is far greater than the body that holds it. Even now, her story echoes through generations, reminding us that the true miracle is not seeing or hearing the world, but believing in it. When the world goes quiet and you feel lost in the dark, remember her words. Keep your face to the sunshine, and you cannot see the shadow. Imagine a hall filled with hundreds of people, politicians, poets, scientists, all silent, waiting. At the center stands a woman who cannot see their faces, cannot hear their applause. Yet when Helen Keller begins to speak, the air itself seems to listen. Her words are not perfect. Her voice trembles, shaped by years of effort and unseen struggle. But within each sound is something purer than language, the echo of courage. She tells them that life is both light and shadow, and that only those who face the dark can truly see the light. She reminds them that blindness is not the absence of sight, but the refusal to see beyond fear. That deafness is not the absence of sound, but the choice to stop listening to the heart. Her speech ends. The crowd rises in thunderous applause, an ocean of sound she will never hear. Yet she feels it in her bones, in the trembling floor, in the vibrations that carry through her fingertips. She smiles. For her, that silent applause is enough. When Helen walks away from the stage, she carries no fame in her heart, only faith. Faith that every person can turn pain into purpose, that every soul has a voice waiting to be heard. She once said, "Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it." And that is the truth she left behind, that within every silence there lies a possibility, a spark, a voice. So when life grows dark and quiet, don't fear the silence. Listen closely. You might just hear your own strength whispering back. If Helen's story touched something inside you, share it. Somewhere out there, someone is sitting in their own kind of silence, waiting to be reminded that hope is still alive. Let this story reach them. Send it to a friend who needs light, courage, or faith to keep going. And if you believe, as Helen did, that every voice matters, even the quiet ones, stay with us. Subscribe to Inspire Through Stories for more true journeys of strength, resilience, and awakening. Because every story has the power to speak, even when the world goes silent.